Welcome to the Money Minus Shame podcast powered by the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute, where we make money human. Here, we eliminate shame from the financial experience and drive money conversations to be holistic and human first. I'm your host, Nate Astle, and welcome to Money Minus Shame. Hello, and welcome back to the Money Minus Shame podcast. I am Nate Astle, the host, and I'm joined with Tyrone White. We are powered by the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute, and so we're excited to talk today about financial shame. This is a hugely important topic when it comes to money, and it's something that comes up in pretty much all of financial therapy work. So, Tyrone, thanks for joining me, and let's talk financial shame a bit.
Yeah, let's talk about it. When I'm working with clients, it always pops up in different forms. Maybe like people saying things is like, oh, I'm stupid, or I'm done with money. This is such a dumb mistake. That's kind of how I see it when dealing with personal finances. But I want to know from you, kind of like, how do you see it happening?
It's one of the biggest emotions that people have around money is feeling like they are faulty or broken and wrong. One of my favorite things to do is explain the difference between guilt and shame. So guilt is the natural feeling that happens when we act outside of our values. Okay, so if I had a tough day at work and I come home and I'm snappy with my partner, I'm going to feel guilty afterwards because that's not how I want to show up in the relationship. That's outside of my values. However, guilt, even though it's an uncomfortable emotion, can be useful. Guilt can motivate me to change. It can, motivate me to apologize. Guilt is kind of like that internal warning system of when we're doing something that we don't, think is something we should do. The difference between that and shame, though, is shame is when we take that behavior that we don't like and we internalize it. And it feels like not that I did a bad thing, but that I am a bad thing. It's not that I snapped at my partner. It's that I'm a mean or a bad partner. It's not that I made a money mistake. It's that I'm bad with money. That difference is huge because shame is the enemy of change. Shame is the thing that keeps us stuck. If I don't believe that I am fundamentally worthwhile, worthy of change, then my motivation to put the effort in to make change is going to go really, really poorly. We have to realize that we are worthy of something different. Our behaviors, the things that we want to do better on, that's fine, but that doesn't define us. We're not defined by our mistakes, and our money story isn't defined by our financial mistakes either.
Well, that's really good. I want to take a step back for everybody who's listening. And if you could just take a minute to define financial shame for us, I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, so financial shame is the belief that somehow we have some kind of moral character flaw or there's something broken within us around money that prevents us from doing or changing or becoming better. So financial shame can look like I'm bad with money. I always make these mistakes. How come my partner, how come my neighbors, how come my friends, how come my parents are able to do all these different money things and I'm just not? Shame is one of those things that we are taught. We are taught how we're supposed to be. And when we don't live up to those ideals, we are often told this because there's something wrong with us. Shame it's such a tough emotion because unfortunately, most of us experience it kind of at a high level. Parents shame us, society shames us, friends, family, all can shame us. And it really makes us feel isolated and alone. So financial shame is one of the more common shame experiences because most of us are pretty isolated when it comes to money. Most of us are trying to live up to some ideal around money that we just can't, or the expectations aren't realistic. And it's a really unfortunate experience that happens to a lot of people.
Okay. With financial shame, from a person who's dealing with that, what are some ways that maybe they can help themselves deal with it to help them with the situation? Or if they were to see someone, what would they ask for try to help with this financial shame?
The first thing we have to do is recognize it and call it out when it's happening. If we don't know that something is a shame, or you may even think of it as a shame voice. I have a voice inside my head that tells me I'm stupid, I'm bad, I'm faulty in whatever way. I first need to recognize and call it out. That's a shame voice. If we don't recognize shame in the moment, it's really easy for us to just kind of go along with it. I almost think of it like the difference between driving in traffic and watching traffic. When you're driving in traffic, you're in the car and you are going somewhere. You have a destination. Our shame thoughts are the car. If we're sitting in the car and we go wherever the shame thoughts tell us to go, we might end up in a place we don't want to be. Versus just watching traffic, I can see some of my shame thoughts come and go, but I don't have to go with them. I don't have to identify with every thought or every feeling that I'm having. Just a little bit of recognition of like, oh, this is shame. It can be helpful to start asking yourself, where did I learn this? Where did I learn that shame was the right response? Who shamed me first? Who shames me often? These can be kind of heavy questions, but what it's doing is it's separating you from the shame. That kind of distance is something that it's really important when it comes to processing shame, is learning that I am not my shame. My shame is a message. My shame is a thought. My shame makes me feel things, but it isn't who I am. That's going to be different than what shame typically says, which is that this is who you are and these are truths. But the truth is that shame is not an accurate measure. Shame tends to be very black and white. I'm all good, I'm all bad. My money is all good and all bad. My decision making is all good or all bad. And that's just not true. So recognizing this is a shame voice, maybe even saying out loud, shame is not truth. Shame is not accurate. For some people, you might even say the shame is a lie. That's a beginning stage of beginning to separate our internal sense of self from the messages that shame might be giving us.
Before we're talking about guilt versus shame, guilt can kind of be helpful, but the shame is pretty much where you want to stay away from. Can guilt lead into shame? I know there's a difference, but can one lead into another? And how can a person know when it's transitioning into shame instead of just staying into the guilt?
Yeah, no, it absolutely can lead into shame. And for a lot of people, they don't recognize the difference. They don't recognize the difference because maybe they've always been shamed, but they haven't had the language of guilt versus shame. As far as recognizing when is my guilt becoming shame, is one, checking in with what is my motivation? Like, do I want to change something? Do I believe that I'm worthy of changing something? If I'm still feeling confident that, okay, I can change some things and there's some things that I can do different, whether with my money or myself or my relationships, that might be guilt. But as soon as you start noticing, what's the point? This is just how I am. If you start noticing yourself using labels like that, how I am, who I am, I'm a bad person, I'm bad with money, versus I may have made some poor choices. If you start noticing that labeling language coming up, that's when you're starting to slip into shame. The other thing is shame is motivated externally, right? It's about other people telling me what I, quote, should be doing or thinking or feeling, while guilt tends to be more internally motivated, where I know and I recognize that there's some things that I want to be doing differently. Shame is based in like a metric of somebody else, while guilt can be more based on the metric we have for ourselves and we know because we've reflected on our values and what's important to us.
Okay. So it sounds like to me there is an aspect where talking with people may cause shame, but just comparing their lives, whether it's on social media or conversations. It seems like that's going to happen. Is there a way to limit the conversation with people when it comes to talk about money, or should they shy away from social media, or how can they use that and the feeling that those things are kind of interfering with them and causing them to have shame about money?
Yeah, well, shame thrives in isolation. Okay, it wants us to feel like we're alone and we're the only one with these problems. So I think it is a good thing to talk about the feelings that we're having. But shame dies when we are talking about something in safe spaces. That's kind of a key concept, safe spaces. If I'm talking about money, but I'm talking about it with a person that isn't very validating, makes a lot of judgments, doesn't seem to want what's best for me, maybe prefers that I do something that they want rather than what I know is best for me, that may increase my feelings of shame. Versus talking about money with someone who does validate me, who reflects where I'm at, that reminds me that I'm human, that helps me get out of my black and white type thinking. That is something that can really decrease my feelings of shame. So it is important that we're able to talk about the things that we're having a hard time with, whether it's with family or friends. Social media, of course, it's not always the most authentic of places, but there might be some safe places on the internet or on social media where you can talk about this. The important thing, though, is that you are paying attention to, does this feel safe? Do I feel seen, validated, heard? Is it non-judgmental? Are people being compassionate, kind, gracious? All of that is going to help me move through my shame much more than other places. And it certainly is going to be more helpful than if I just keep my feelings to myself, which unfortunately is what most of us have been taught to do, especially when it comes to money, because money's private and we don't talk about money. But I don't know why. It's something that affects literally all of us every single day. So it's important that we find safe spaces to talk about it.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because there's sometimes when I work with people, the past comes up in the present. Like we don't realize how our past or how we grew up with money affects the present. Could our past relationship with money, maybe how we grew up, lack of money, maybe a lot of abundance of money can cause shame? Could that play a factor in financial shame?
Of course, we are always a combination of our past experiences. And even if I'm in a very different financial situation now than what I was before, it doesn't mean that that voice just magically goes away. Okay. We have to be very intentional about recognizing that shame voice or those shame thoughts, about recognizing that we're not the thing that shame tells us and that we are different than our past. It's hard because our brains are designed and set up to look for patterns. And so if our past has been full of patterns of us being shamed or making mistakes or failing at something, it's so easy because that's what our brains are supposed to do. It's so easy to look for patterns and, oh my gosh, I'm always going to be this way and I'm stuck. This is a character trait, a personality flaw. That is something we need to push back against. Actually, there's a whole lot of things that's very different about my past. If there are patterns that are recurring, I'm in a different place than I was before. My resources are different. My knowledge is different. We grow every single day. There's new opportunities. There's something new about us all the time. So yes, there might be some patterns from the past that we can recognize and be conscientious of and be proactive about, but that doesn't mean it's all the same. It's different day today and it's a different day tomorrow.
Can you give us like some examples or some scenarios where people come in with deal with financial shame?
One of the two most common emotions around money is fear and is shame. Shame, I would say, is something almost universal. And what I mean by that is it is more common than not to have someone walk in and have some amount of shame around money. It can look like a lot of different things. I've worked with clients who had parents that used money to control them, or money always had these strings attached. And so they've moved away from their family members. Maybe they had family members that judged them a lot for a lot of things, including money. Maybe they are surrounded by friends that seem to be able to do all these things, and I just can't get my stuff together and I'm so behind. That feeling then leads to, well, it must be something wrong with me. I have clients that overspend and they know that they overspend and it makes them feel awful about themselves. And it's the kind of feeling not of, well, I made some mistakes, so let me move forward. But instead it's this is just who I am. This is a problem I've always had. So one of the things that I'm trying to do as far as, actionable steps, things I want people to step away from is we have to start giving ourselves more grace and more compassion because shame takes specific data points, specific memories, specific behaviors, and paints a picture with only those memories or those behaviors. It says, well, you've made mistakes before, and so I guess the whole piece is just you making mistakes. The thing we have to remember is, are there exceptions to this rule? There always are. Do I always make money mistakes? No. There's probably a whole lot of things that you've done really positively. One of them might be coming to financial therapy. That's a very smart, intentional, decision. I chose to seek out information when I was feeling sad or lost or scared or disappointed. That's all positive stuff. I often ask people, what would you say to a friend, a family member, a child that was feeling this way about themselves? Most of the time, they are able to access compassion for someone else. And we say, okay, why do they deserve compassion but not you? And I think on some level, they know that they are treating themselves harsher than they would anyone else in their lives. Really antidoting, I don't know if that's a word or not, but the antidote to shame, along with getting resources and getting extra support is self-compassion. Self-compassion isn't excusing yourself for responsibility. That's actually what shame tells us, is that if I give myself compassion, then I'm just going to keep messing up. No, self-compassion is still holding yourself accountable, but doing it in a way that is honoring all the positive movement that you have made over the years, all of the goodness that you are. It's learning to find the nurturing voice instead of the one that tears us down. And it's learning to bring that nurturing voice, whether it's our own, whether it's a family member, even if it's an imaginary figure. Some people have connections with characters, book characters, video game characters, movie or TV show characters that feels very soothing, feels very homey. Great. What would that person say about this situation? What kindness would they offer me? Can I bring that kindness into my mind? Can I bring that kindness into my body? I know that might sound weird, but people, when they feel shame, often feel it very heavy in their chest or in their neck and throat. I say, okay, I want you to take your hand, your dominant hand, and I want you to put that hand on that part of you that's feeling the shame. And I want you just to do some nice, gentle taps, little nurturing, and imagine that character or that person in your life that's nurturing, and just remind your body, hey, we're okay. We can grow, we can change, we can learn things, but we're not bad people. And our money isn't bad or inherently bad. We're just learning and growing. You are going to have a very different emotional experience around money if you can consistently push back against shame and instead replace it with a more compassionate perspective, a more compassionate voice.
Oh, thank you for all that. I think that's very helpful for people. Now, when we take all the things that you said, what are some indicators that a person should possibly go see professional help with
Yeah.
financial shame?
If you're noticing that the way you talk about your money or the way that you talk about yourself is derogatory and is using a lot of labeling, and you are noticing that it's interfering with your functioning, that's definitely a time to get help. When I say interfering with your functioning, if I'm not able to look at my bank account, or I know that I'm avoiding, or I know that every time I think about money, I start to spiral and I start to get really depressed, that's probably a good indicator that there's something more to process here, to move through. Other things, to look for is if I notice that my feelings around a situation aren't really matching the situation itself. Like I know that I don't like using this word, but if I know that I'm overreacting to something, that might be something that I need to start looking into what's going on here, because we don't just overreact because it's fun. Like we're having a reaction because there's something that our brains and our bodies are responding to. And so if I can't figure out what that is for me, or if I don't know where to go with it, that's the time to try and figure out how can I get extra professional help.
Now, if you're seeking out professional help, if you're a person that's dealing with financial shame and you're seeking out professional help, is any mental health professional good, or should they seek out financial therapists or any type of mental health professional will be helpful in this situation?
Oh, I think most mental health professionals, hopefully, I believe if you're a good one, you should be working to help people, reduce their feelings of shame. I do think that many mental health professionals don't have specific training in money, though. And so finding financial therapists, finding mental health practitioners that have training in money issues is going to be very helpful, because mental health professionals are also people, and quite honestly, a lot of them have their own money shame stuff too. So just make sure that as you are seeking out professional support, you're finding people that are willing to help you deconstruct some of these shame experiences. But no, shame is something that comes into most mental health offices. It's very, very common. So getting support is better than getting no support. But if you can, finding a financial therapist or somebody that can help you process that shame around money is going to be helpful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all the information. It was very helpful to me. Like I learned a lot today, a lot of things to recognize or see when I'm working with clients. So thank you for that. But I think that's great. I think that pretty much covers everything that we need to talk about with financial shame. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we kind of wrap up the podcast?
Maybe just a quick reminder, you're doing better than you think you are. There's a lot of hope, even if we can't feel it all the time, even if we can't think it all the time. There is more hope than our shame tells us there is. Try to give yourself a little grace, maybe a lot of grace. Try to find some ways that you can be compassionate to yourself and reach out, find support, find help. whether it's professional help or personal help, but we aren't supposed to do things alone. Humans aren't built for that. That includes money. Money isn't supposed to be something that we handle all by ourselves and we do perfectly all the time. That's not realistic. It's not helpful. So make sure that you are finding grace and compassion and support with money, just like you would anything else in your life. Thank you for having this conversation with me. I am so excited to continue this conversation around deconstructing the shame around money and helping us learn and grow when it comes to how we view money itself. Next time, we are going to be talking about financial trauma, which is another thing that we really need to talk about because it affects so many people. But thank you all for listening to the Money Minus Shame podcast, where we take the shame out of money. Thanks for listening to the Money Minus Shame podcast, powered by the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute. This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for mental health services or financial advice. This is a cafeteria where you can take what you like and leave the rest. Make sure to like and subscribe so you're the first to know when new episodes drop. And if you like what you hear, let us know. Reach out at money-shame@gmail.com or send us a DM with thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like to see us cover. Take care of yourself out there, and we'll see you next time.